Overwriting is something that every author experiences at one point or another, whether they're professional or amateur. We like the idea of adding as much detail as possible. We like the idea of conveying our ideas in a way that we think is clear when we're often just beating our reader over the head. But that's not the best way. So today we're going to go over 6 tips on how to avoid overwriting. So let's jump into it with the first tip. Know your purpose. Whether you're discovery writing or outlining your story, I think that knowing your purpose for your scene can greatly inform your writing and help you write exactly what you want to convey on in a given scene. When I know the purpose that I have for a given scene, it makes it a lot easier for me to not throw in too many unnecessary details. Still add detail, but I don't go on and on about something that doesn't actually matter to my story. For instance, if I was writing a story about an accountant in New York who happens to be in a cab at the time, if I go on and on and on about a description of the cab driver for like a page or 2 pages, the reader is going to think that this cab driver is somehow really important to the story. When the cab driver doesn't show up again for the rest of the story, they're going to be disappointed. They're going to feel like they were lied to because of the description that just went on and on and on. So keep that in mind. Know the purpose for your scene. Let's give that same example. If this accountant is a clean freak and he gets into the cab, let's say it's the opening scene, and he gets into the cab and it's just filthy. Or maybe it's clean, but he focuses on like some crumbs that are on the seat next to him the whole ride, and he just goes on and on and on about these crumbs. That's important to the story because his cleanliness will come up throughout the story. So just keep that in mind when you're writing. You can convey a lot by what you have, and if you have too much of something that doesn't matter, your reader feels like they're made a promise that they won't get any answers to. Next tip. You want to be concise. No one likes a sentence that goes on and on and on about something, and then they read the sentence and they're like, what did I even just read? That doesn't make any sense. So I have an example here that I'll read for you. In pondering the intricate layers of existence, one may grapple with the challenges of discerning the underlying meaning, as it often resides obscured within the complex interplay of thoughts and perceptions. So, that's a pretty long sentence. Let me give you a shortened version. In pondering existence, it's difficult to find meaning due to complex thoughts and perceptions. So, these 2 sentences convey essentially the same thing. The second one is better because it's more concise and people don't have to sit and think about what they just read to understand it. Keep that in mind when you're writing your novel or your short story or whatever you're writing. Sometimes it's okay not to be concise, but you don't want it to be so far on the other side of the spectrum that people have to sit and think about what they just read. The more concise, the better. The next tip I have is to trust your reader. Trusting the reader is something that a lot of new writers struggle with. They often will go on and on about certain ideas that they have. They feel like they're not conveying it to the reader well enough, so they just pound the idea over and over again. Often when you sit back and you pull a lot of the over-explanation away from what your characters are doing, it adds to your story. For instance, if you're writing a story about some psychotic guy and it's the opening scene and you want to convey that they're psychotic, or that they're, having visions, that they're seeing things that aren't really there, You don't need to mention it 2 or 3 times. You can mention it once, or you can mention that this guy, maybe he's doing things that remind another character of their uncle who had schizophrenia, who often saw things that weren't there. There's different ways to convey it without coming out and saying it 3 or 4 times that will still get it across to the reader. And that's where you need to put that trust in the reader. The next tip I have is to avoid redundancy. You don't need to say the sky was beautiful and then say in the next sentence the sky was the most beautiful he had ever seen. You just need those once. You just need that once. The second sentence or the first one of those sentences is redundant. So keep that in mind. Often new writers especially will write something and then they'll write kind of the same thing in this very next line that they say. It kind of has to go with the show don't tell advice that's often given. A lot of times when new writers learn to show, they often still tell right after. You don't need to do that. So that's a good tip. Trimming adjectives and adverbs. This isn't a huge deal. There are a lot of books with a lot of adjectives and a lot of good adverbs. Name of the Wind has a lot of adverbs. Patrick Rothfuss likes to add those in his dialogue tags. But you don't need them necessarily. If you take adverbs out, the sentences usually read exactly the same. They do have a purpose, but keep that in mind that too many of them often is just kind of annoying. Same with adjectives. If you have a sunset that your character is watching and they go on and on about the blues and the different hues of the colors, it's overwritten to a point that your reader will probably just skim it and not pay any attention to it. So keep that in mind as well. Next tip, having simplified dialogue. You don't need your characters to beat around the bush to convey something. You can do that. Maybe you have a nervous character who does that, and that's their mechanism for coping with whatever they're going through, is they don't come out and say what they're trying to get across. But in most cases, you don't need your characters to beat around the bush. I have an example here that I'm going to read you of characters who's beating around the bush, and then I have rewritten the sentence so it's much more concise. Megan, I can't begin to express the profound disappointment that surges through me right now. Your decision to neglect the project, despite knowing how much it meant to all of us, has me frustrated and confused. That's a really long sentence that I don't know why any character would say it like that when they could just say this. Megan, I'm really disappointed. I don't understand why you ignored the project when it mattered so much. These two sentences are very different, but they convey the same idea. You don't need to have your characters go on and on. You can just have them say what they want, what they need to say, and then you can move on. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What are your tips for avoiding overwriting, especially for new writers? How did you eliminate overwriting from your projects?